This is problem 7.12 in Brigham and Houston's Fundamentals of Financial Management, Concise 9th edition. Here we're comparing yield to maturity and yield to call. Alright, so it is the beginning of 2016 and you're looking at a bond that was issued 2 years prior. When it was issued, it had an 8% annual coupon and 30-year maturity. Alright, so 2 years later it has a 28-year maturity left. There's 5 years of call protection, so it could not be called during the first 5 years of life. So the first time it can be called is the end of 2018, beginning of 2019. So that would be 3 years from now. If it's called, there is a call premium of 8%, which means that the call price would be $1,080 as opposed to only $1,000 par value. Interest rates decline, so the price of the bond's gone up, and it's selling at 119.12, which is 119.12% of par. So with $1,000 par value, the price is currently $1191.20. The price reflects everybody's best estimations of whether the bond's going to be called or not. So what we want to do is calculate yield to maturity and yield to call. From an investor standpoint, whichever one's lower is what you can probably expect. Alright, so number of periods, rate, present value or price, future value, which is the par value, and PMT is the coupon. If we're calculating the yield to maturity, that's the first one, the yield to maturity assumes that it's not called and doesn't default. So this one also is in college textbook world, this one also has an annual coupon. Again, almost all bonds pay semi-annually, but the authors are just dumbing this down to make it easier. It has a 8% annual coupon. So that means that it pays 8% of par, or $80 a year, on a $1,000 par value. The present value is the price, and it is given in the problem as $1191.20. Okay, so now to calculate the yield to maturity, we just calculate rate. Number of periods, payment of $80 a year, current price at $1191.20, and the future value par of $1,000. And our yield to maturity on this bond would be 6.50%. To calculate the yield to call, all we have to do is change the things that change. Alright, the price is going to be the same. The coupon's going to be the same. What'll change is if they can call it the first chance they get, which is 3 years from now, the investor will actually receive $1,080 as opposed to only $1,000. But that's 3 years from now, and that gives you a yield to call of 3.72. The assumption is that an investor will receive the lower of yield to call or yield to maturity, because remember, these yields are based on the current price. Everybody knows when it can be called, and everybody knows the price it can be called. So the current price of the bond reflects everybody's best estimation of what will happen. When I say everybody, it reflects the average investor's expectation over what will happen. So if you bought the bond, you should expect to earn 3.72%, the lower of yield to maturity or yield to call. If the bond had been selling at a discount rather than the premium, would the yield to maturity have been the more likely return? Absolutely. Corporations only call bonds when the yield that on premium bonds. Okay, so if a bond is selling at higher than par, that's the only time they call bonds. They wouldn't call a bond if it's selling at a discount to par, because why pay the extra $80 for a bond when you can buy it on the cheap anyway? Now, what would have happened is if interest rates had gone up instead of down, let's just put in numbers, put in $900 for both of these. If interest rates had spiked, all right, the issuer of the bond wouldn't be calling it, because calling it would just compound their problem. They'd have to refinance the loan at the higher interest rate, so there's no reason to call it. The only reason they'll call a bond is when it hurts the investor. All right, so interest rates have gone up. Why refinance the bond? Just keep on paying the lower interest rate.